Right now, somewhere in your phone, there's a group chat you've muted. Maybe a coworker who annoyed you, maybe a family member you're avoiding, maybe just a notification you swipe away without reading. You do this without thinking. Cutting someone off, going quiet, disappearing from a conversation, it costs you nothing. It's the easiest thing in the world. For most of human history, that same act, going quiet on someone, walking away from a group, being cut out of a conversation, wasn't nothing. It was the single most terrifying thing that could happen to a person. Not death, not violence, silence. Anthropologists studying surviving hunter-gatherer societies, groups like the Jew Hoanzi of the Kalahari, have documented something that sounds almost too simple to be a punishment at all. When someone broke the rules of the group, stole too much, lied too often, refused to share, the tribe didn't beat them, they didn't kill them. They just stopped talking to them. No eye contact, no name spoken aloud. You could be standing in the middle of camp, surrounded by the only people you'd ever known, and be treated as if you were made of air. This is called social ostracism. And here's the part that should stop you cold. For a Pleistocene human, this wasn't a social inconvenience. It was a death sentence with a delay timer on it. Your body today still runs on the operating system that was built for that world. And that's why a Monday morning being left out of the group lunch invite can hijack your entire nervous system in a way that objectively makes no sense. We're talking about roughly 200,000 years of Homo sapiens living in bands of maybe 20 to 50 people. No backup tribe down the road, no emergency numbers, no stranger who'd take you in out of kindness, because strangers were, by default, dangerous. If your group turned on you, there was no next option. This wasn't like today, where you could lose one friend group and rebuild in another. Your tribe was the entire structure of your survival, your food access, your protection from predators, your mate selection, your children's future, and almost nobody realizes that the fear response you get from being excluded on a group chat is the exact same biological alarm your ancestors got when they sensed the tribe was starting to look through them instead of at them. The question is, what did that punishment actually look like on the ground? And why did some tribes consider it worse than execution? There are at least 4 layers to how this played out, each one darker than the last, and by the end, you'll understand why some anthropologists argue exile was, functionally, a slower and crueler death than being killed outright. Layer 1 starts with something deceptively small, gossip. Long before any formal punishment, the tribe's version of justice began as talk. Researchers like Christopher Boehm, who spent years studying egalitarian foraging societies, documented how groups used gossip and mockery as the first line of defense against people who got too selfish, too violent, or too proud. A hunter who hoarded meat instead of sharing it wasn't confronted directly at first. He became the subject of quiet jokes around the fire, stories told just loud enough for him to hear the edges of them. This is where the string tightens before anyone even touches the knife. Compare that to now. You already know this feeling. It's the version of being talked about at work. Sensing a conversation, stop the second you walk into the break room. The tribe used that same mechanism, but the stakes were existential. If gossip didn't correct the behavior, the second layer began. And this is where it stopped being subtle. The group started physically excluding the person from shared activities. Not invited on the hunt, not given a share of the kill, sitting slightly outside the circle at the fire, close enough to feel the warmth, far enough to know they weren't part of it anymore. Here's the part that trips people up when they first hear it. This wasn't cruelty for its own sake. It was information. The tribe was broadcasting, without a single violent act, that this person's future in the group was in question. And that broadcast worked on a level words couldn't reach, because for a Pleistocene brain, being physically separated from the fire at night wasn't symbolic. It was a direct signal of increased vulnerability to cold, to predators, to hunger. That leads into the third layer. And this is where the punishment stops looking social and starts looking biological. Sustained ostracism doesn't just hurt your feelings. It activates the same regions of the brain as physical pain. This has been measured in modern neuroscience using an experiment called cyberball, developed by psychologist Kipling Williams, where participants are excluded from a simple ball-tossing game with strangers they'll never meet, and their brain scans still light up in the anterior cingulate cortex, the same region associated with the distress of physical injury. Think about that. Your brain cannot fully tell the difference between being frozen out of a virtual game with strangers and being frozen out of the group that once decided whether you'd eat tonight. That circuitry wasn't built for cyberball. It was built around a fire, tens of thousands of years ago, and it never got the memo that the stakes changed. So here's the objection you're probably forming right now. Okay, but that's just discomfort. That's not actually a death sentence. People get excluded, and they're fine. And that's exactly where the fourth layer comes in, the one that turns this from an emotional wound into a literal one. For a small foraging band, full exile, being physically removed from the group, wasn't a metaphor. It meant walking into unfamiliar territory alone, without a hunting party to bring down large game, without others to keep watch while you slept, without anyone to help if you got sick or injured. Anthropological accounts of banishment among groups like some Aboriginal Australian communities and various Native American nations describe exile as being treated, functionally, as equivalent to death, sometimes explicitly ritualized that way, with the exiled person mourned by the community as if they had already died. In several accounts, the banished individual's chances of long-term survival alone were assumed to be near zero. The tribe wasn't threatening to hurt you, they were simply removing the only thing keeping you alive, which was them. Now here's where the story pivots into something you weren't expecting, because this is where it gets stranger than pure survival math. In several documented tribal cultures, banishment carried a spiritual dimension that made it heavier than physical danger alone. Among some groups, being cast out meant more than losing your camp. It meant losing your name, being spoken by the living, being cut off from ancestral recognition, effectively erased from the story of your own people while your heart was still beating. This is the part historians call social death, a state where a person is alive in body but already treated, ritually and psychologically, as though they no longer exist. Some anthropological accounts describe exiled individuals experiencing a kind of despair distinct from ordinary grief, a collapse that looked less like sadness and more like giving up on life itself, because in a mind built entirely around belonging, non-existence in the eyes of the group could feel indistinguishable from actual death. And this is where the twist sharpens into something almost uncomfortable to sit with. In some documented cases across different exile traditions, banished individuals did not die from starvation or exposure or predators. They died from something closer to despair, a wasting away that modern observers have struggled to explain through purely physical causes. The body kept functioning, the will to keep it going didn't. Which means, in the harshest possible reading, the tribe didn't need weapons to end a life. They only needed to stop looking at someone. Compare that to your life right now. You've felt a small, ridiculous fraction of this. The read receipt with no reply, the plans made without you, the slow realization that a group you used to belong to has quietly moved on without telling you. Your chest tightens. Your mind loops the same scenario for hours. You tell yourself it's irrational, that it shouldn't matter this much, and yet it does, and now you know why. That reaction isn't a flaw in your wiring, it's an inheritance. Your ancestors who felt that fear the strongest, who couldn't tolerate the idea of being cut off from the group, were the ones who fought hardest to stay in, to repair the relationship, to share the extra meat, to apologize first. The ones who didn't feel it as strongly drifted, got excluded, and, more often than not, didn't pass on their genes. You are, quite literally, descended from the humans who were the most afraid of being left out. So, the worst punishment a tribe could hand down was never about pain. It was about being made invisible while your heart was still going, about having your name stop being said out loud by the only people who'd ever said it. And somewhere underneath the modern noise, the group chats, the read receipts, the meetings you weren't invited to, that same old fear is still running, quietly, patiently, the same way it always has. Not because you're broken, because for 200,000 years, being seen by your people was the only thing standing between you and the dark, and some part of you has never stopped keeping watch for the moment they stop looking back.